What is renunciation? Renunciation is nothing but growth. Growth to a higher dimension. Growth to a higher state of being. Just as you see in this visual, a caterpillar comes into being with only one purpose, and that is to become a butterfly. If a caterpillar chooses not to grow into a butterfly, there is only one fate that is in store for that caterpillar: death. Similarly, friends, you and I are born into this world of mortality only to grow into that immortal status, the state of realization. And to understand the difference between our life and that life of realization, you get some glimpse of it when you look at the life of a caterpillar and the life of a butterfly. A caterpillar lives in confinement. A caterpillar's life is one of limitation, of dependence. And the moment it grows into a butterfly, it experiences complete freedom. It breaks free from its own limitations. And this is what you and I are heir to. So, the Bhagavad Gita Vedanta introduces us to this in a manner that no other school of thought, no other knowledge in the world introduces us. If you look at the philosophies of the world, all of them fall short of this last bit, the transformation from a human being into that infinite status that has been put across so brilliantly, so beautifully, so precisely. And we as Indians must live up to this heritage. So, renunciation. You understand renunciation as growth only when you get back to your own life. We all have gone through a period of amazing growth. We were born as infants. And that infant lying on its back doesn't rest content. It struggles. It puts in all its effort and continues to do so until one fine day it succeeds in what? Turning over. And then it sees a completely different world. Can you imagine the freedom that child, infant experiences? When it's on its back, all that it sees is the ceiling. How boring. It turns over and it sees so much excitement in the world. Does it rest content there? No. It struggles to move forward, to crawl, to sit, to walk, and so on, till that child becomes a full-grown adult. Now, at every stage of that infant's growth into a full-grown adult, there is mind-boggling achievement. There is tremendous drive and motivation. There is this vision of a higher state of being. At every stage, the infant sees the possibility of a new dimension, more fulfilling avenues, higher enjoyment, and thus there is never a dull moment in that infant's life. At every stage, it reaches out, struggles for something higher. It's a period of exponential growth. You have all that the Gita, all that Vedanta asks us to do is to relive that spirit of renunciation, of growth, is to revive that tremendous growth phase in us. And then you're okay. So, renunciation is that. Now what are the avenues of growth for us? is the question. As we saw yesterday, you are at the physical level. When you're operating at the physical level, your energy is severely limited. Your physical energies are limited. You can't run beyond a certain point. You can't climb stairs beyond a certain point. All your physical energies are limited. The moment you transcend the physical identification and identify with an emotional drive or motivation, you find that you have access to far greater reserves of energy than you ever imagined. You go still further to the intellectual level, and there is much more. See, you look at the independence movement. What did we have then at our command? No resources worth the name. We had no political clout. We had no financial resources. We had no support from any superpower. We had nothing going for us except the will. And this brought 300 million Indians together. At that time we were 300 million. And we achieved something that was a world record. Even today people are amazed how we managed to bring it about. We took on the superpower of the world, not out of hatred, but out of love. Because we were fighting for something that was just. We were fighting for truth. And this is what makes the difference. That spirit is still there in us. Why have we lost it is the question. Just a little over 50 years and we've completely lost sight of that. All you need to do is revive that. You take any field of activity. Take sport. The Indian cricket team at the World Cup lost miserably to Australia in the first round, right? Physical. Then their levels of expertise didn't change, their skill didn't change, nothing changed except their motivation. So they raised their motivation levels to emotional and intellectual. And they got to the finals. They lost at the finals because they didn't rise still further to the spirit, Atman. If you have that strong spiritual drive, you can achieve anything in the world. And that is put forward in the Gita Dhyana shlokas, which says, Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat krupa tamaham vande paramananda madhavam. Mukam karoti vachalam. This knowledge, this spiritual motivation is such that it can make a mute person speak. It can make a lame person scale mountains. It's a poetic way of saying you can achieve the impossible. So this is what now. How does this fit into renunciation? Renunciation is growth to a higher dimension. As you go up, the lower fades into insignificance. The lower no longer holds sway over you. And that is called renunciation. Renunciation is not giving up things. First of all, you cannot give up anything. It's not possible to give up. This morning somebody was asking, how can we give up desires? You can't give up desires. You can only pick up a desire at a higher level. And when you have a higher level of inspiration and motivation, the lower desires no longer tempt you. And that's what renunciation is. Renunciation is not life denying. It is life enabling. You have to be able to see that. Because we have misunderstood the concept of renunciation, we've given up renunciation. In other words, it's like that infant saying, I don't want to give up where I am. The moment you take the stand that I don't want to give up what I have now, the level that I am at, you stop growing. You have to be always in learning mode in life. Whatever be your age, whatever be your status, whatever be your achievement, If you're in learning mode, there is scope for improvement. However high up you may be by whatever standard, the moment you take the stand, oh, I've arrived, this is it. That's the end of the person. So, renunciation is something that one must practice, and renunciation then leads to meditation. When you reach a state of uparati or withdrawal from the world, you become automatically contemplative. We saw the difference, on the first day we saw the difference between the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. The Upanishads are meant for contemplative people, for people who have reached the state of renunciation already. To a person who's contemplating on Atman all the time, you ask him to go fight challenges in life, it doesn't work with him. By the same token, if you go to an active person and say, contemplate on Atman, he doesn't know what you're talking about. So the trick is in matching the sadhana with your personality. If there's a mismatch, then there's no growth, irrespective of how much effort you put in. That matching is what is important. So, in any case, once you reach the state of renunciation, it leads to meditation. You automatically become meditative by nature, and at that stage, if you meditate, which means, as we saw earlier, focus the mind on one thought to the exclusion of all other thoughts, and the intellect is supervising this thought pattern, then what happens? See, the mind is chanting only one thought. Say, suppose you're chanting the mantra Om. There is Om, you chant Om, Om, Om. In this, the mind is chanting the thought, repeating the thought. The intellect, whose job it is to discriminate between pairs of opposites, has only one job, that is, discriminate between sound and silence. When you continue the chant for a while, in meditation, you're supposed to, once you reach that level of dhyana, the full concentrated concentration, you're supposed to stop the chant. When you stop the chant, what happens? The sound goes, the thought goes. When the thought goes, the mind gets extinct. What remains is silence. There is only one thing, silence. There are no two things to discriminate between, so the intellect also gets extinct, it has no further job to do. And in that silence, you reach the state of realization. This is, you remember, on the first day we started at the beginning, today is the last day, this is the end of the spiritual sadhana. This doesn't mean we've all got there. So, now we move to verse 68.
तस्माद्यस्य महाबाहो निगृहीतानि सर्वशः इन्द्रियाणीन्द्रियार्थेभ्यः तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता.
O Mahabaho, mighty armed one whose senses are completely restrained from sense objects, is well established in wisdom. So, in this verse, he concludes the beautiful sequence of thought begun in verse 60. Let's see what this sequence of thought is. In verse 60, he says, the senses carry away the mind, violently carry away the mind. In 61, the advice given is, first restrain the senses. This is a very important piece of advice to all spiritual practitioners. The first step to excellence in any field of endeavor is sense control. Whether you're a doctor or an engineer or an corporate czar or whatever it is that you are. If you want to achieve excellence, you have to have a hold over your senses. If you don't restrain the senses, verses 62 and 63 speak of the stairway of destruction, how one thought unsupervised by the intellect can lead you to destruction. And in 64 he gives the prescription for sense control. When you control the senses, prasadam adhigacchati, you get peace of mind. 65 says, in that peace that you have achieved as a result of intellectual supervision of your sense contact, buddhi paryavatishthate, your intellect becomes sharper. And thus you reach the higher realms of spiritual achievement. If you don't control, 66 says, you have neither peace nor happiness. Neither do you achieve the world, nor do you get spiritual evolution. 67 connects with 60 and says, that mind which has been taken away by the senses now drags the all-important intellect away. And now in 68, the conclusion that he's come to is tasmat, therefore, control the senses, restrain the senses. So he says, see, the sense organs and the sense objects have a magnetic affinity towards each other. But you need to understand that you have to be in command over this interaction. If you are not in command over the interaction, the senses take charge of your personality and lead you to destruction. This has been portrayed in this magnificent metaphor of the chariot from the Kathopanishad. The chariot, in fact, it's now associated with the Gita, but it originally was given out in the Upanishad. The chariot, the individual, Arjuna is the individual in the chariot. Krishna is the charioteer, the intellect. The 5 horses represent the 5 senses that are raring to go. The reins represent the mind. In a chariot, if the charioteer, the intellect, is alert and skillful, he holds the reins just right, not too loose. If the reins are held too loose, each horse goes in whichever direction it wants to, and ultimately the chariot crashes. It doesn't reach its destination. If the reins are held too tight, horses are immobilized. So the charioteer, the skill of the charioteer is to hold the reins just enough to help guide the horses so that you reach the destination. Similarly, in our personality, the intellect is the charioteer. If the intellect has no control over the senses, and this control is exercised through the mind. If there is no control, your senses run all over the place in all directions, and in the end you crash. You don't achieve your destination, you don't achieve success. If the intellect is too tight with the senses, meaning restrains the senses too much, it leads to frustration. Even then you don't reach your destination. But the right amount of control and the senses, the intellect, guides the mind and the senses beautifully till you reach your destination. And what is your destination? Self-realization. You gain, the promise held out to us is, you gain realization, you gain the world, you gain happiness. If you don't do this, elsewhere in the Gita it says, na siddhim, na sukham, na param gatim. You don't achieve success in the world, you don't get sukham, happiness, nor do you get that state of realization. So, this is the beautiful sequence of thought in this portion, 69.
या निशा सर्वभूतानां तस्यां जागर्ति संयमी यस्यां जागृति भूतानि सा निशा पश्यतो मुनेः.
That which is night to all beings, in that the self-controlled one awakes. That in which all beings are awake is night to the Muni, sage, who sees. This verse, when you look at it, you wonder, if you just read it, you wonder, what is he talking about? Yet, he is portraying something that is really true. He is giving the difference between the person of realization, a person who has that vision, as we saw yesterday. The Buddha said, I am awake. Between a person who has awakened to that reality and a person who is still asleep. What is the difference? That which is night to all beings, night, nisha, means ignorance. That to which we have no access, that state of infinity. In that, the self-controlled one awakes. He has access to that fourth plane of consciousness. And that in which all beings are awake. What are we all awake to? We are awake to the body, physical things, emotional delights and intellectual raptures. He is asleep to that, to the Muni who sees. This represents, this is true not only in the absolute sense, which is what he's talking about, but it's true even in the relative sense. An extroverted person literally is up all night. I'm sure there are such people here also in Delhi. Life begins in Bombay, for extroverted people, life begins after 10 p.m. An introverted person goes to bed at 10 and wakes up early. An extroverted person comes home only at 4 a.m. The only time an extroverted person has access to Brahma Muhurta, Brahma Muhurta is between 4 and 6 a.m., Sattvic time, is when he comes home staggering at 4 and goes to sleep. That's it. An introverted person is awake at 4 o'clock, early. Sense indulgence is what keeps an extroverted person going. Inner contemplation is what keeps the introverted person going. So when an introverted person goes into raptures about some book that he has read or some philosophy that he has access to, or if you go and tell your friends about the lectures, the second chapter of the Gita that you have had access to, they'll wonder, they ask you, have you lost it? And when they tell you, assuming you are an introverted person, they tell you, oh, there's this new discotheque that has opened up, there's a new restaurant, there's a new hotel, and I don't know what else is going on in Delhi. You wonder how you can't see yourself doing all those things. They are two completely different worlds in which the extroverted person and the introverted person live. In fact, we all living in the same city, Delhi, we live our own different worlds. A stockbroker lives a stockbroking world. He sees only stockbrokers around, he sees shares around, he sees his own world. A musician in the same city, Delhi, sees only music. A philosopher sees only philosophy. An industrialist sees only whatever he has access to. So we all live in our own little worlds. The thing to do is to expand our vision and get some concept of that totality. Get out of your little cocoons and visualize something that is beyond. What relief it gives you, you have to only experience it. The more you restrict your vision, the less productive you are, the less efficient you are, the less you achieve in life. All the great achievers in the world have had some vision which is beyond their personal self-centered, selfish interests. In that movie, American President. Have you seen that? Please see it. It shows the American president and all the actions that he does, everything that he is involved in, all that he is engaged in is only geared towards how do I retain my position as president. And then towards the end of his term as president, thanks to some other persons around him, he understands and he breaks out of all that and he says, all this time I've been trying to only retain my position. I have never been a president. I have not played the role of a president of the United States. And he says, now I'm going to set aside all that. I don't